Mike Scow, we're in episode 4. How's it feel?
Feels good. I mean, I feel like we have some momentum going from episode 2 with Brian Keating, episode 3 with my boy Joey Mack, and now we're here bringing in a buddy of yours from back in your old stomping ground. And that, like, we're getting better and better, and the guests are getting better and better. Man, I'm excited.
And geographically, I love that we went to Oklahoma City, then we went to Oregon, and like you said, now we get to go home for me. And this is special. This is our first episode. Someone from the Los Angeles area. Someone I go back to 2009. That was the year that I graduated from Cal State LA, and as did this guest as well. We had a ton of classes together our senior year. And when I think about it, I don't think we had a single class with each other before that. And yeah, so like we went from like never seeing each other on campus at all to like I saw him every single day, had a bunch of meals with him. And it didn't take long hanging out with this person. You understood he's the real deal. And what I mean is, like, as a sportscaster, even at that age, at a young age, you could tell he was legit as a sportscaster and as a person. I love him. I mean, I got to say, when I go back home, I've been going back home for about 10 years now. And just about every time I come home, he goes way out of his way to come see me. It's not an easy drive to come see me from LA County to like the Orange County area where I'm usually at. I love this guy. He's a pro's pro. Like I said, a Cal State LA graduate. He bleeds purple and gold, born and raised in LA. He's the kind of guy, when he comes to see you, he's not going to leave until the last minute. And in fact, when I think back to my son's baby shower 3 years ago, he was the only one that stayed the whole time. Crashed on the couch like a champ.
That is a true friend. A true friend.
Legendary. The legend himself, Kevin Figures. Welcome to Sports Amigos. I love you, man. It's good to see you.
Oh, love you too, man. Thank you for the nice intro. I'm glad you got the check from the mail. I appreciate that.
Kev, man, there's so much to catch up on. We haven't talked in a little bit, and I just want to take everyone to the beginning when it comes to you. You're, like I said, you're an LA guy through and through. Washington Prep High School, right? 2004.
That's right.
2004. And we crossed paths at Cal State LA, graduated together. I feel like we really cut our teeth in the 7-8 months when we were going to school together. And then we continued to work together the next few years before I moved to Texas to start my broadcasting career. Take us to the beginning of when you knew you wanted to do, or you were starting to get interested in sports radio. And for those that don't know, he's been working in the business for over a dozen years at the flagship station of UCLA football and basketball, the LA Kings, the Dodgers, the Clippers, used to be the flagship of the Lakers. You work at an amazing station. You've been there for a long time. So take us to where everything started for you.
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. Going into my early years in high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do from a career standpoint. When I was a child, I wanted to be a firefighter, things like that, the classic job you think about. But as I got older and older, that really didn't appeal to me so much. And legitimately, I'd say between the ages of like 12 and maybe 15 or 16, I literally had no clue. One thing I did do, and I never thought this was angling itself towards me getting a job in sports talk radio. My friends and I, whether it was after church or my friends at school, would always at lunchtime gather together and argue sports. We talk about what happened in last night's game with the Lakers or Clippers, or what's happening this weekend in the NFL or college football. And we start arguing. All of a sudden, I stumble onto sports talk radio. And of course, at the time, you think like, well, you turn on the radio, these guys are arguing and debating back and forth as to, who's better, who's going to win between USC and Cal this weekend. And I say, well, hell, I do the exact same thing, between third and fourth period in high school. I can do what they're doing. Now, obviously, Brandon, and you guys know, you get into the industry, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Everybody thinks they can just, sit in front of a microphone and talk for an hour straight like it's nothing. It's a lot more difficult than it actually seems. But of course, being a naive high school kid at the time, that's what I felt. So that's really where my love for sports talk radio and sports media began. It literally came about from me and my friends arguing on the schoolyard about sports And that's literally where it came from.
So you go from having that passion for sports, the being comfortable talking about sports in front of your friends. When did that go from that to, all right, what about maybe I should try to work at a radio station? Take us to that first moment, because you have now been in this business for over a dozen years. Your voice is heard on the LA radio on a daily basis, both as a producer and with your podcast, FNA Podcast, which is a great podcast. Follow that, FNA Show, at FNA Show on Twitter. Check that out. Take us to when, it went from this is fun to how about let's try working at a radio station.
So that began when I was at Cal State LA. I was attending with you. And I don't believe at the time that I began interning at AM 570, I'm not even sure we had met yet, Brandon. I'm not 100% sure. I believe by the time that we had already connected and started a relationship, I had been there for maybe a year or so.
Yeah, you had already started. I remember that. You'd already started like a year or so. Yeah, and I was like, what? You work at AM 570? Oh, my God. Like, I just thought that was the coolest thing. We were in college and you were already there.
Right. So it's a little bit of good fortune and fortunate timing. This happens a lot. They say you make your own breaks. And to a certain degree, you do in this industry and many others. But a lot of times, timing works in your favor. So I was at my home in my bedroom doing homework one night, and oftentimes I was listening to sports talk radio. And I happened to be listening to Joe McDonnell, who was a host here in Los Angeles for many, many years. Joe passed away some time ago. But listening to his show, and he said over the air, we're looking for new interns. If there's anyone who's interested, email our producer. And the producer, his name is Tim Cates, who's someone, if you listen to AM 570 radio, he's all over the place. The Dodgers pregame show, UCLA, produces our afternoon drive show. Everyone knows Tim. So Tim at the time was producing for Joe McDonnell. So I said, okay, why not? Shoot an email
you
over
heard
to Tim.
You heard that on the radio? Is that what you just said?
I heard that on the radio, Brandon. That's where I found out.
So we're talking like social media is not really a thing yet. The internet is a thing, but like you don't get too much news, so to speak, from it. You literally heard it on the radio, one of the oldest ways you can get the news.
Right. And so funny enough, so I was listening at the time to the competitor station was a radio station called 1540, The Ticket. And I was, in the industry, what you call a P1. So a P1 is a person that listens to a radio station morning, noon, and night. So they're in their car, they get out of their car, they're sitting at their desk, they get back into their car. It's all that radio station pretty much all day long. I love that station to death. I called that station. I actually, as a nervous, young, early years college student, called them and said, are you guys hiring any interns? I'd love to, join you. I'm a big fan of the station. And the receptionist told me, oh yeah, we're looking for new interns. I'll get back to you. And she never called back. So I didn't lose hope. I knew I was still early on in the process of my career, or hopefully what I thought would be my career. And yeah, Brandon, I literally was just sitting there listening to the radio station. Joe blasted it out there. And I said, just be aggressive, take a chance, send an email. And Tim responded that night. So their show was on the air, I believe, from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., Monday through Friday at the time. I emailed Tim probably about 9:15 that night. Tim responded at about 9:45. And then his boss, my boss now, emailed me that morning and set up a meeting 2 days later. So that all of this came together within a matter of days. A matter of days, I had my feet in the building, and I was starting my internship at AM 570 just from listening to the radio station. So that's part of the fortunate timing I was talking about.
So you go from, hoping and making an attempt to sort of break into this business and try and, get your foot through the door. But what was that experience like? Now you're through the door. You have a spot for yourself that you can start learning and start listening and interacting with people. I think all three of us can agree that the industry is not what many, many people think or envision to be. But what was that experience like for you in those first few months as you try to establish yourself and get to know people and sort of embed yourself in this?
So when I first started, I was a little bit awestruck. These are people that I looked up to, that were heroes that I listened to for a long period of time. Nationally speaking, Petros Papadakis is one of the voices of the Pac-12, has been doing games for years. now works for Fox and FS1, is our partner, Matt Money Smith. When their show started, as a matter of fact, I started with them. So their show started in January of 2007. I was the first intern they ever had. So I was starting the same time they were starting. Now, Matt had already been there for a while. Petros was leaving 1540 the ticket, coming over to AM 570. But again, I've been listening to all these guys for years. So the biggest thing for me at that time was to, yes, try to put my head down, be obedient, listen to whatever they asked me to do, but also trying to learn. So I never wanted to be just a couch potato, for lack of a better term, to sit back and just, see what they do. Their producer at the time was a man named David Vassay, who is now the lead reporter for the Dodgers. He travels with the Dodgers for the radio station. He's a reporter, but as back then, he was their producer. And this is some more good fortune in my direction. At the time, Vassay not only was producing Petros and Matt's show, he was also a field producer for the radio station. So there were often times where he would leave me as an intern to look over the show while he was out in the field going to Laker practices or Clipper practices or Dodger games. Now he didn't do it early on. It took me about a week or a couple of weeks to maybe about a month or so. He would set up the show and say, hey, here's the phone number of so-and-so guest. Call them, make sure the show is on time. So I was kind of thrown into the fire a little bit. But to Dave's credit, he wouldn't have done that with someone that he didn't trust. So I like to think that he did that because he trusted me to do the job properly. So I got, experience in almost producing a radio show, at least assistant producing a radio show in Los Angeles as an intern, barely a month into the gig. That just doesn't happen that often. And through that, Dave was able to trust me. Petros and Matt were able to trust me. My bosses were able to trust me. And I also took on responsibilities that weren't necessarily my own. It's the classic story of, be the first one there, the last one to leave, go over and above what's asked of you. So at the time, we were also the radio home of the Lakers. And I got into a good relationship with the Lakers radio producer at the time, Sharon Bellio. And she kind of took me under her wing. And there were times I'd come in and help her with Laker games, whether it's cutting highlights or setting up interviews, doing things above and beyond that were asked of me to do. So as cliche as it may sound, those sort of things do end up working in your favor, because had I not done that, I would not have eventually been elevated from an intern to getting hired as an employee later on.
I want to follow up on that a little bit, because we have that, we grind, we work, we get to that point. But then there's also that, okay, we get to have fun with this too. We get to enjoy what we do. We get to fanboy out a little bit. So I want to put you on the spot just a bit and ask you, do you have maybe not a fanboy moment where you just sort of geek out externally, but you're trying to internalize that fanboy moment of, holy crap, there's so-and-so, or, oh my gosh, that I'm here, like I'm courtside at the Staples Center. Do you have any of those moments or those memories that jump out at you?
The biggest one for me was when Vince Scully came in studio. We were doing a radiothon, and we normally do. We didn't get a chance to do it this year to raise money for disabled veterans, but it's something we've been doing for years at the radio station. And Vince Scully came in studio one year, and I introduced myself, and he said, "Hi, Kevin, nice to meet you." And I was like, "You said my name?"
I could die now. Vince Scully just said my name.
Those are the best moments. Those are the best moments in the industry.
If only you could have recorded it.
I know, and I should have. He may have charged me if I did that. I'm not sure. But, and so I stood next to Shaq. I interviewed Kobe Bryant, and those were amazing moments too. But it's something about Vince Scully, one of the voices of baseball over the last 80 some odd years, however long it's been. It's absolutely amazing. So that was the only time that I actually felt myself being awestruck and being a little starstruck. That was an amazing experience.
So Kevin, as a producer on a radio show, and let alone the second biggest market in the country, you get thrown into learning how to keep time of a show, all the behind the scenes stuff you're learning, and you're getting all this great experience. And also at the same time, you're getting to have your voice on the program once in a while. A host would talk to you. Kevin, what do you think about this? So how do you go from the first few years getting this great experience to starting to get confidence of talking yourself on air with these guys and ultimately branching out into your own projects and trying to get some on-air experience yourself?
It definitely takes time. And so when I initially would get brought on the air, especially when I was an intern with Petros and Money, it was always them making fun of me in some way, shape, or form. And that's their way of telling you that they like you. So if they bring you in and they tease you a lot, you know, and I remember my early days whenever they bring me on the air, before I say a word, I start sweating. So I would get extremely nervous. I wouldn't know what to say. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier when I said, oh, standing on the schoolyard arguing about sports, it's easy. It's a lot different when you know you're turning on a microphone and there are potentially thousands, hundreds of thousands nowadays in the,
millions in LA.
Nowadays,
millions.
Brandon, and millions in LA, not to mention the people that listen from across the country now when it comes to all these apps that you can listen on. It's a wide range of people that could be listening. So like anything else, it just comes with reps. It comes with just getting more on-air experience. I was also fortunate that probably about 6 years into my career at the radio station, we started hosting shows. They would take behind-the-scenes people like myself and some other producers and board operators and opened up the web stream so we can actually host our own shows and get our reps that way. And it was from that myself and my podcast partner, Adam Osland, you know, we got kind of garnered a rapport. We did a lot of shows together on the stream together and decided, why don't we spin this off and just make this into a podcast? And so that's how the genesis of the F&A podcast came off of us hosting a show together a couple hours every weekend on the AM 570 stream. So it's just like anything else, it comes with getting a little bit of reps, more confidence being built up. And that's how you get. Look, there are certain people, by the way, Brandon, who just have an it factor to them. You throw them in front of the microphone, and they just have it, and they just get it from day one. But I tell you, I caution to tell anybody that's interested in getting into this industry, those types of people are few and far between. It definitely takes a while. It takes a while for you to get up to a point where you can be confident to carry a show, to be on the air, to say what you want to say, to not forget what you want to say. Because there are so many things that go through your mind when a microphone is in front of you and that red light is on that you just don't anticipate and don't necessarily feel coming until you're actually in that moment.
You have this platform now with the web stream that you've been able to start picking up those reps. And I know your F&A podcast has been, you know, on the up and up. It's been growing in that. How did you use that to, one, you know, groom yourself as a broadcaster, but how did you use that platform to also start to figure out what works and figure out your voice, your cadence, and figure out who you are as a broadcaster?
Yeah, so what we did, and it was smartly of us, and my partner Adam Austin, by the way, does pre, half, and post for the Clippers. We're the flagship of the Clippers at AM 570. So we both kind of parlayed this podcasting game to some on-air gigs. But we basically tried to treat the podcast as if it was an on-air show. So generally, when you do a podcast like this one or any other, it's very free-flowing. You know, you don't take any breaks. You just jump on. It's a free-for-all for the most part. Maybe you drop in an ad here or there. But in the early days of our podcast, we wanted to treat it as if we were doing a regular over-the-air show. So we come in, we try to make sure there was no segment that was more than 10, 12, 15 minutes long. We take a time out, we come back. And that's how we kind of brought it up, trained up our on-air chops. We also wanted to make sure that we kept it nice and clean from a language standpoint. We wanted to make sure that if we're treat this as if you are actually on the air. And through all those reps, I mean, I would hate to go back and listen to our first or second or third podcast at this point, to be honest with you. I probably should, just to see how far I've come. But we were really, really raw back then.
For me and Brandon, since we've started this thing, we're only a few episodes in. Like, what are those tips, tricks, and advice you would have for guys like us who are just trying to sort of kick our own thing off?
Well, have a direction. Know exactly what you are, which it seems like you guys know exactly what you're doing. There's a theme behind this show. You know exactly what direction you're going in. Because in the podcasting game, generally speaking, you want to find a niche and really jump on top of that niche and dominate it. You don't want to spread yourself too far thin. People are going to follow you if they know exactly what they're looking for. And try things. Try different things, especially if there's designs of this or anyone else who may be thinking of hosting on the air or hosting their own podcast. Experiment with segments, maybe bring in some produced segments. Try to find things that work and things that don't. The things that work, you hold on to. The ones that don't, you leave them to the side. But I think especially when you're on the ground floor, you're just starting up, now is the time to try things out and see what works and what doesn't. And then, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14 episodes in, you have a solid footing to go off of.
So, Kevin, you have all this great radio experience, but also over the years, you've dove in here and there into some TV. Let's break down the things you have really tried to do along with all of you, because you've had a full-time radio job for a long time now, and it is hard to add on to that. So break down for the audience the TV things you've tried to get mixed in over the years in torrents, and now, once in a while, you're on NBC in LA with Fred Rogan, the legendary Fred Rogan on Go Rogan. Is that the name of the show, Go Rogan?
Yeah, Going Rogan. Yep.
Going Rogan. Yeah. Here you are. Yeah. Not only on the biggest radio station one of the biggest radio stations in the country, but once in a while you get on arguably the biggest TV station in LA, especially when it comes to covering sports. Fred's done such a great job over the years. Yeah. Talk about the TV stuff you've been trying to mix in and how challenging that is to do while you have a full-time job doing something else.
Yeah, it's all about time management, being able to manage your time as wisely as you possibly can. Like when you and I were together, we both worked in Torrance together, Brandon. Matter of fact, I have you to thank for helping me get that opportunity in Torrance, working at City Cable 3. And that was definitely different. Now, back then I was part-time, so I actually had a more flexible schedule. I wasn't at the radio station every single day. Okay. So I had the time during the day or late afternoons, or some days I was totally free from the radio station to go out and do some things in the field. And that was a unique experience that I had never done before, covering high school sports in the city of Torrance. But it kind of taught me a little bit of a different type of chops when it comes to television versus radio. Normally in radio, you have a long time to kind of go into depth and go into detail and explain yourself and explain the way that you think. In television, you have a certain amount of time. Get in and get out. Say what you have to say, throw to a produced package, come back. They tell you have 13, 14, 15 seconds, whatever it is, and go right back to it. So there's definitely some more time constraints involved when it comes to television, more so than radio. But then when it comes to getting on Channel 4 with Fred Rogan, funny enough, it came together as a joke. So at the time, I was a technical producer. I wasn't producing his radio show quite yet. And I was in our newsroom, and he was talking about his TV show, Going Rogan, which I had seen, obviously, and I knew of. And I was joking with him, hey, Fred, when are you going to put me on that show? And he said, you want to come on? I was like, sure. He says, great, we'll get you on.
That's all it takes.
Just like that. Now,
that's all Fred, it takes with him, yeah.
Now, obviously, I had been a contributor to the show. I jump on the air a lot. And at that time, even with Fred and Rodney, I jumped on the air quite often.
The radio show.
Yeah, the radio show.
Rodney Pete and Fred Rogan's radio show.
Yes, Fred Rogan and Rodney Pete. So I would jump on. They would invite me on and ask my thoughts, which I felt grateful for, because then that's a broadcaster who's been in the industry for 50 years, 40 years, however long it's been for Fred. And Rodney, who played in the NFL for 16 years, was part of the Best Damn Sports Show on Fox Sports Net for a long time, has been a broadcaster for a while. And these two guys are telling me that they value my opinion. That meant a lot to me. So I jumped on the radio show, contributed a lot, and clearly Fred liked what he heard, because otherwise he would not put me on television on his show, his baby that he started, created, produces, all of that. So that gave me a jolt of confidence too right there. If I ever had any that was waning, for Fred Rogan to tell me you're good enough to be on my TV show as well as my radio show, that meant a lot.
It's one thing to talk live on the radio. How nervous were you to be on his TV show, the first TV spot you did?
Very. And I remember my first night being on TV and what I was trying to do. And I kind of mapped out what I was going to say. His producer would send me the topics that we were going to cover on that week's show. And basically I went through it and said, okay, I'm going to say this when this topic comes up. I'm going to say this when this topic comes up. And I'm going to say this when this topic comes up. And needless to say, it did not work out that way. I came off as very nervous. I came off as if I was trying to prepare statements that I had gone over earlier in the day. And it just didn't come off very well. So what I ended up doing, and I said, what if I take a radio approach to television? I know we're going to have maybe 3 minutes for this topic, but once I have the floor, I have the floor, and I can say whatever it is I need to. So, and quite honestly, that's where my radio experience helped me in television. They say, Kevin, what do you think of the Lakers re-signing Contavious Caldwell-Pope? I'm just making something up right now. And so instead of having a oh, his numbers were this, his stats were that, this was X, Y, and Z, I can say, you know what?
He wants your opinion. Right. Yeah. He doesn't want facts. He doesn't want stats. He wants your opinion.
Right. And I can give you my opinion off the top of my head. No different than if I'm walking down the street and someone asks me what I feel about it, or if you ask me what I'm feeling about it right now. And I found that's the best course of action for me. Give me a topic. I'll read it once. I know exactly what direction I want to go in, and I'm not going to prepare anything. I'm not going to have some pun in my head. If one pops up, great. If it doesn't, that's fine too. Just make sure you get the information and the opinion out. So that's the biggest thing that I learned transitioning from radio to television, and where radio has actually helped me in TV.
Mike, what a different beast that is. Like us being on TV, we usually had a script that we would read, 90% of the time, and we're trying to tell stories. We're trying to report facts. What a different beast that is, Mike, going from that in TV to being on the radio. It's like there is no script, no holds barred. Just give your opinion, right, Mike?
Yeah. I lean back on my experience because my last and final job in the broadcast industry was in Eugene, Oregon. And I made friends, very good friends with the baseball and men's basketball play-by-play announcer for the Oregon Ducks. He was on last week with us, Joey McMurray, and he had me on his unscripted show, Duck Insider. But yeah, you go from this, I'm going to calculate, I'm going to formulate, to this, tell me your thoughts, tell me what you think. And it can be kind of difficult at times because you think, I want to formulate X, Y, Z that I want to say, but that doesn't work for an unscripted show. It doesn't really work for radio. It's a very different beast. And I know that we're in sort of an age now where that is becoming a thing where journalists are taught, or maybe not taught, but maybe this is just sort of what they experience. It's what, we've experienced, that you go from learning, follow the AP style book, follow X, Y, Z, follow this formula to, no, here's a bullet point, talk for 15 minutes. Here's another bullet point, talk for 15 minutes.
Yeah, just go.
Yeah. And so I'm Kevin, I'm curious of your thoughts on how do you translate and take what you learn in college now and your experience from learning in college to working in radio in a podcast form, because that's really uncharted territory for a lot of people now. It's a lot of learn on the fly kind of thing. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on going from college to the professional world within that radio realm.
So it's funny, Mike. The biggest thing for me, and I joke around and tell people this all the time, I learned most of the things that I know about radio at the radio station.
Yes.
I learned very little, and this is no slight to Cal State LA. My professors were excellent, but Brandon can tell you this. Our college was geared more towards television. I learned a whole lot about the television industry at Cal State LA, and very little about radio. As a matter of fact, Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the college just launched its radio station like 5 or 6 years ago. We didn't even have a college radio station at Cal State.
We didn't have the TV and film and radio department did not even have their own building. And when we were graduating, they had just broke ground on what is now, they're, I believe, world class. I think it's more towards film, but still there's more of there's more there at Cal State LA than there was when we were there, for sure. And we had to just get, like, the experience that was more valuable for us was just in the internships and the jobs that we were getting outside of school. Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing specifically in this industry. If you want to get into the broadcasting industry, my advice to you was to try to find an internship somewhere, try to find somebody on the inside that you can network with. That's the biggest thing. Anybody in any industry will tell you how important networking is. And that's almost even more important than your knowledge base. It's almost like who you know is better than what you know. Because if you know the right people, they can tell you what to learn. You can mimic them, you can follow them, you can look at what they do and follow what they do and learn the tricks of the trade from them. Reading stuff out of books is great. Looking up YouTube videos and things of that nature are excellent, but nothing beats actual hands-on experience. Every single thing that I learned about the radio station, whether it's editing audio, what to say on the air, all those things I learned after I actually started my internship and then subsequently was hired as an employee at the radio station. So schooling is important for sure, but if you can find your way into a door with a professional who knows what they're doing, try to find a way to get a good relationship with those people and see if they can take you under their wing. It'll take you really, really far.
And back to Cal State LA real quick. Got some swag here.
Nice. I like it.
Got a couple of Golden Eagle shirts. I'm wearing my Golden Eagle sweat jacket, whatever we call this. I got that, I think, when I was still working in Abilene. I take a lot of pride, and I know you do too, Kevin, in coming from Cal State LA, because going to a school like that, which is a commuter school in a second biggest city in the country, going to a school like that, which is Division II in athletics, and as for someone that wants to work in sports, was a completely different experience than someone like Mike, or even the last two guys we've had on the show. All of them went to schools that had Division I, Pac-12, or even Big 12 athletic programs, where like nationally televised games are coming to their campus. There's just a whole different experience going to a school that has Division I sports as opposed to where we came from. How do you feel like going to Cal State LA, covering the things we were at that school, which, I mean, let's face it, we're on a much smaller scale. And the things that were going on at Cal State LA were not on TV, except for maybe one thing here or there. How do you feel like that experience for us and for you specifically helped you, get ready for what was to come?
Well, I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, but it's almost as if it welcomed me to be able to make a few more mistakes because I knew there weren't so many eyeballs on me. That doesn't necessarily mean that I wasn't trying as hard or that I wasn't, but there was less pressure when you know that there's going to be a smaller audience of people that are going to go on the Cal State LA website. Remember, this is to your point you mentioned earlier, Brandon. Social media wasn't around. I remember, matter of fact, quick story about Cal State LA. I remember being in a class.
Kevin, I think you and I were in a class together, and I know that we created our Twitter accounts in a class.
That was the story. Yeah.
Right. We were in that class together, right?
I was getting ready to tell. Yes, because our professor, and I forget his name, but our professor said
Stephen Grace. I think it's Stephen Grace.
Stephen Grace. Excellent.
Shout out Professor Grace.
Yeah, Professor Grace was great. One of my favorites there. And he told us the first day of class, maybe the second day of class, I believe it was the first night. He says, the next big thing is going to be this app called Twitter where you can communicate with anybody.
He called it.
And many of us were like, sure, man, whatever you say. He says, create a Twitter account and tweet at me, whatever his at was, whatever his. It
was like our first assignment. Yeah.
Yeah. And basically tweet at me that you were in class. And that's how I'm going to know that you were in class today.
That's how we took attendance. That's true.
That's how we took attendance for our first class. So if you scroll back to the first tweet that I ever sent, and I'm pretty sure with Brandon to the first tweet he ever sent, I was in class today at Stephen Grace or whatever Professor Grace's Twitter was.
Yeah, well, that's true. And the first followers we have were from that class.
Right.
Each other. Bianca, I think, is someone else I could think of, a classmate of ours, Professor Grace. Yeah, we had a much different experience. And now I kind of want to pivot over to going. So we graduated college in 2009, and you and I had a couple more years together before I moved to Texas, and we just did some like hustling together. Like, you had your part-time job at the radio station, and I was just interning anywhere that I could. And most of the time we hung out, it was because we were trying to work on something together. Like, we were so driven back then, which is now 10 years ago, to just get a rep. Like, you would drive all the way from Burbank to La Mirada, which anyone that's in Southern California knows that's not an easy drive to do. He would make that drive pretty frequently to go to a La Mirada High School varsity basketball game so we could plug in our 2 little tiny mics into a tiny little recorder and we could do play-by-play at a random high school game in Southern California. Like, what do you remember about those days where, I mean, just like the grind was real, you know, like the struggle was real for us to continue to push each other and push ourselves to practice, because that's what it really came down to. No one was listening to those recordings. It was just for me and you. Like literally right. No one ever heard them. And I have some in this old computer right here from 2006. Those recordings are right here and no one's ever heard them. So when you think back to those days, how important were those days, the first few years out of college, to just keep practicing on your own?
Extremely important, because similar to something I mentioned earlier, you're trying a bunch of different things. So you did play-by-play. I was an analyst. Why would I ever be a basketball analyst? You know, I don't know, but let's try it out. Let's see how this whole thing sounds. And more than
you know your
else,
stuff. That's why, Kevin, you know your stuff.
Thank you, Brandon. Damn straight. No, but we were trying something different. And again, it was just trying to get ourselves in front of a microphone. You know, if you have designs of being in television, of being in radio, your voice being heard in any way, shape, and form, get yourself in front of a microphone. I don't care what you're doing. If you're reading something, maybe you can get your cadence down of how you want to speak or the way that you read. All of that is important. So for us, I enjoyed it. We had, how many late nights did we have, you know, driving back after recording something and trying to edit it on your computer, you know, days of me meeting you at your father's tuxedo shop and we're editing stuff in the back, you know, like, but those were days I wouldn't trade for anything, especially when it's somebody you're working with, somebody that has the same goals as you, a close friend of yours, someone you care about, you're pushing each other. Those days back in the day were invaluable. And like you said, we may have recorded things that nobody ever heard, but it didn't matter because we had a good time doing it and we both ended up being better for it.
Cheers to that. Cheers to that one.
Yeah, heck yeah. I will raise a glass to that. I want to move on to a topic that I know in LA is very meaningful, resonates, it's impactful, and it's endearing to a lot of people. It's a lot of different things, but Kobe Bryant for a long time is going to be sort of that heart and soul of LA. And I know you being tuned in to the radio world, tuned into the sports world there. If you could walk us back to the helicopter crash, if you could walk us back to when you found out, where you found out, if you could replay that for us, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Kevin, did you work that day?
I was not working that day. I was off. I was having a brunch with my girlfriend at this small cafe not too far from my apartment in Burbank. And she has one of those, not Apple Watches, but one of those watches connects to your phone and little messages come in. So her friend alerts her, hey, something happened to Kobe Bryant. And she looks at her watch and says, hey, I think you need to look into this. Someone said Kobe Bryant died. And I'm like, all right, sure, whatever you say. What's a hoax? I look at my phone. I have tweets from certain people in the industry that come directly to me, and TMZ Sports is one of them. And when I saw a tweet from TMZ Sports that Kobe Bryant is dead in a helicopter crash, I knew this wasn't a hoax because TMZ is almost always right.
Yeah, people can say what they want about TMZ, especially TMZ Sports, but they get things right a lot. And especially these big ones are always on it. They're always accurate.
You can call them, you can call them smutty, you can call them trash, whatever you want to call them. They have like a better than 95% accuracy rate, especially with major stories like this. So I quite honestly was in a state of shock. It was one of those where you didn't quite believe it at the time. And the Clippers were playing that day. I believe they were in Orlando, but I don't fully remember. I just remember there was a full slate of NBA games going on that day. And there was a lot of players. They would show footage of the players talking to each other doing warm-ups. Like, no way, really? Like, having to actually play through that was a difficult day. So quite honestly, it didn't even hit me for a full day. It was tough. It was tough. And like, few people have been more critical of Kobe Bryant as a basketball player than me throughout the years. Anyone who knows me knows that. But having the chance to go to his basketball camp, interviewed him one time, couldn't have been nicer, couldn't have been more welcoming, couldn't have been more gracious with his time. You knew that he cared. He definitely cared about the fans. He cared about his family. Look, he died in a helicopter crash along with his daughter going to his daughter's basketball game. You know what I mean? He was deeply loved. I mean, we went, our show, which is normally middays, we moved up into the mornings. We covered up our mornings drive show so we can just take calls. And for 3 straight days, we never had a free phone line from people calling in, telling stories about, their first Kobe Bryant memory, if they met him personally, what he meant to them. It's weird, people that you have never met, the kind of impact they can have on people's lives, especially if you're a public figure like that. If anybody listening to this ever becomes big, become a big TV star like Brandon or something like that, just realize that you can touch a lot of people. You have the ability to touch a lot of people, and Kobe Bryant definitely inspired a lot of people. And he's sorely missed by the city, big time. But just to have that outpouring of love and support through us at the radio station, that was something special, to have all those callers call in and tell us how much he meant to them.
Kevin, the day he died, did you go to Staples Center or anywhere, or did you go anywhere the rest of the week at all? I mean, there's just tributes and murals everywhere you could go in LA, I imagine.
Yeah, there were tributes and murals all over the place. I personally did not go anywhere. I went to work. We had a scheduled remote a golf tournament, a charity golf tournament. I believe Justin Turner of the Dodgers was doing a charity golf tournament that Monday, that next day, and we canceled it, or at least we canceled our appearance and did our regular radio show to kind of do a tribute to Kobe. And that kind of encapsulated our entire week. And by the time every single day was over, I just needed to sit down for a minute, and just reflect. So I did not get a chance to go out to any of the memorials at Staples Center or anywhere around the city. But I mean, if you go back and look at any of the photos or the videos, the amount of people, the thousands and thousands of flowers and murals and paintings, it tells you the kind of impact he made on the people of the city, for sure.
I know you said that you have a couple experiences interviewing him. You're within that sports world of people who interview him, and Kobe had, everybody sort of seems to have a story about Kobe that means something to them. Is there a Kobe story of yours that just sort of resonates with you a little more?
To a degree. So when I covered him at his basketball camp, he wasn't able to arrive on the first day, or if he did, he came in late and didn't see the campers. But and we were there waiting to record with him on day 2, I believe, of his 3 or 4 day camp. I forget exactly what it was.
Were you working at LakerNation.com at that point?
So at the time, I was at Laker Nation. Yes, right. I was at LakerNation.com at the time. And so we went out to his camp. He came in, and of course, the place erupts, and everybody turns their head, and Kobe Bryant comes in. But nice and calm, allows himself to be encapsulated by all the camp counselor, or all the campers. Talked to him, shook hands, took pictures, couldn't be nicer. And, a lot of times people who have that stature will be standoffish. They'll have their handlers come in, say, no, don't get too close. Let them stand on stage and talk for a couple of minutes and then disappear out of the back door and you never see him again. And he wasn't like that. He made himself available to his campers, made sure he did everything that he needed to do with them before he came to us. And quite personally, I'm glad he did that. Don't do the media stuff first. Don't worry about us. We're fine. Take care of the kids who came here to see you, to be able to work with you. And that shows how much Kobe Bryant got it. A lot of these guys don't necessarily get it, but Kobe Bryant was one of those people that actually got it.
Do you think that Kobe the player and Kobe the retiree, do you think he was accurately depicted? Because we've heard so many stories. Do you think he was accurately depicted in the public eye?
Yeah, because Kobe Bryant, the player, will tell you, was a giant a-hole, especially if things weren't going his way. And, he always felt that he was the guy. Put it on my shoulders. This is why he and Shaq had a spat all the time. He felt that he can do at least as well as Shaq could, and Shaq didn't work as hard as he was. So if you aren't grinding as much as me, you don't deserve as big of the pie as me. So I'm going to be the guy. And he was so mellow. It was almost the exact opposite. Now, he still has a competitive edge to him And that's why he had so many projects that he was working on in retirement. But definitely a lot more mellow in retirement. He felt he didn't need to have the edge. I remember when he retired, or when he announced that he was going to retire, his swan song, his final season, he was like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. The waking up, going through the treatment, all the hard work that it takes just to get ready to play a game. And you can see the relief in his face. And you can see that. And the fact that he was so giving of himself and of his time to other players. He was such a mentor to Jason Tatum and a lot of other younger players who are in the league now. I mean, anybody that saw his memorial service saw how many people in the NBA community, past and present,
it's like everyone was there
to support him.
It was crazy. The whole league was there.
Yeah, Brandon, and he had a personal relationship with many of those people, many of those people. So he could have very easily said, I was a great player. I'm going to the Hall of Fame. Deuces. I don't care about any of you guys. The game is gone. He never did that. He always made himself available to other players, to anybody that was able to seek him out for his mentorship. And it transcends sports. Mookie Betts, when he was still with the Boston Red Sox, he had a personal relationship with Kobe Bryant. And he said Kobe helped him cultivate his mindset as a great athlete. And that's something that a lot of people don't know.
Man, I still have to sort of recall back to Sabrina Ionescu's eulogy at the memorial. She was a player I covered at Oregon for most of her career. And she very much embodied what Kobe was as a player. But the fact that Kobe, when he was a player and after he retired, recognized people who he needed to take under his wing, and seeing the impact that he had on somebody like Sabrina, that was what touched me the most. That was my, I say it loosely, but it was sort of my Kobe connection, because getting to talk with Sabrina on a regular basis and then see how much that impacted her and how much
and still is.
Yeah,
still is very much.
But yeah, and not just Kobe, but Gigi and that entire family, just not just one person, but the entire Bryant family, to see how they touched, impacted, and worked with so many different people in so many different, corners of the world, to see Kobe involved with women's basketball the way that he was, elevating that platform the way that he did, that spoke so much to me. Kobe being a girl dad, me being a girl dad, that's the kind of thing that it just resonates in a different way.
What it is too, it's an example of him paying it forward, because you mentioned Sabrina Ionescu speaking at the memorial service. Well, who else spoke? Michael Jordan, someone who Kobe Bryant sought out for mentorship when he was a young basketball player. So Kobe, as arrogant as he was and as selfish as people tabbed him to be, he recognized he couldn't do it all by himself. He couldn't do it all by himself. He had to have mentors. Yep. He had to have people that he looked up to. Michael was one of them, and many others. That Mike D'Antoni was one. Hakeem Olajuwon trained him a lot. So there was a lot of guys that he looked up to. And so when his career was over, he felt I had to pay it forward and do the exact same thing. And you mentioned him being a girl dad with all of his daughters, saying, here's another way for me to make an impact and to help put women's basketball on the map and help somebody else. So, and that's the biggest thing also in this industry and many others. I always try to make sure that I make myself available to anyone in the industry that needs help, because as I mentioned to you earlier, I sure didn't do it by myself. None of us did. We all need help from somewhere. And so if I can make it to where I've made it at this point in time, while getting mentorship and getting help along the way, it's only right for me to be able to do that for somebody else.
It's been a year, 2020, that LA sports fans are going to remember forever. It starts off with the tragic death of Kobe Bryant, and now we've had 2 world championships won by, you got the Lakers, got the Dodgers, and I think about all of the things you've gotten to cover, Kevin, throughout the years, working at AM 570 and all of these different gigs you've gotten in LA. You have this, I don't even know what the word is, unique, rare experience of having your entire career in Los Angeles. Whereas you look at Mike and I, he worked at 2 stations. I'm now at the 3rd station in my career. in completely different parts of the country from where I grew up. And that was the same with Mike going from Abilene, Texas to Eugene, Oregon. And he decided to come home and start a whole new life with his family. You've had this huge honor, I would say. I would think you take a big honor and pride in this, having your entire career in LA. What's been your thought process throughout the years as far as your career goes? Have you thought about trying to, because you've been behind the scenes for the most part while still getting a ton of reps on air, whether it be podcasts, as a producer, daily anchor like you do with AM 570. Have you had any thoughts of leaving to a small market, trying to take a different path back to LA to get an on-air job? Like, what's been going through your mind through the last 12 plus years thinking about that kind of thing?
Yeah, Brandon, there have definitely been times where I thought about branching out and, looking in different markets and seeing what other opportunities present themselves. And for whatever reason, some of those just never materialized or were not exactly what I was looking for. And so I always had confidence in myself that I can continue to grind through, continue to find ways. If I can find a way to get my reps here and put it in front of the faces of the bosses, or I guess the ears and radio of the people that make the decisions here, I can work my way up that ladder. Now, it might take a little bit more time, but I can make my way up that ladder in incremental steps. And to a certain degree, I've been able to do that. Do I host my own show? No, but I'm the executive producer of the Midday Show and am on the air quite often. I'm an update anchor at Fox Sports Radio nationally. I'm a host at Compass Media Networks, their national coverage of the NFL and college football. And I got that opportunity through my opportunity of becoming a sports anchor or update anchor at Fox Sports Radio, which I parlayed from my job at AM 570. So it's kind of a snowball effect in interconnecting all the dots. But to answer your question, yes, I definitely looked around and saw what else was out there. With always the thought in the back of my mind, can I grind through just a little bit longer and find a way to make it here? Because if you make it here, you're set.
I had a thought. I just remembered a little while ago as you were talking about all that. I remember when I was still working in South Texas, you and Adam, your FNA show, you got an opportunity to be on the big airwaves one night. Is that so? Take us back to that night. You're on the air. You and Adam, like right. You guys are behind the mic. You're not the producers. You're on air, and that was an amazing opportunity. Have you guys got any other opportunities like that? And even if not, take us back to that night. What that was like. I remember that like it was yesterday.
Yeah. So at the time, I believe Blake Griffin had just suffered an injury with the Clippers, and it was a pretty big deal. It was pretty big news, and there wasn't much else happening. So Adam asked our boss if we could possibly jump on the air and do a show that night, and our boss gave us the green light and said absolutely. And so I was trying to contain my excitement as much as I possibly could, while also trying to make sure I channeled it and expressed it on the air, because this was a huge opportunity. This was the first time either of us were actually able to host a show on the actual radio airwaves. So that was an exciting night. It was definitely an exciting night, and we made it through. I tried to make sure I stayed as measured as I possibly could be, while also staying excited at the same time. It's very hard to juggle those two emotions at once. As a collective, the two of us have not been able to have a show together on the air yet again. Hopefully we will in the near future, but he's done his on-air work, as I mentioned, with the Clippers pre-half and post, and I've done mine with Fox Sports Radio, Compass Media Networks. But hopefully one day in the future, the FNA podcast will be back on the terrestrial radio airways pretty soon.
Mike, you ready to move on to the fun thing?
Let me loosen up a little bit. Let me get the mechanism ready for this.
Are we doing pull-ups?
All right.
I can do 100 right now. Let's go.
Oh, no way.
Not quite that.
Let's do it.
Yeah, Kevin, we've started this with the second episode on. We do what is called a lightning round.
The lightning round.
The lightning round.
It's from Friends. You'll see when we air the episode.
So it is 10 questions. In this case, we felt it was warranted to have a bonus question. So technically 11 questions on the spot. Gonna just see how you react. Have fun with it. It is what it is. but
Okay.
we will get this party started. Question number 1. Best LA Laker of all time.
Magic Johnson.
Ooh, you were quick on that one too. Nice.
Don't have to think twice.
He's confident. He's sold. I like it.
I don't even need an explanation. That's a great answer. That's good.
Your Mount Rushmore. So this is 4. Your Mount Rushmore of LA play-by-play. It could be college, high school, pro, anywhere.
Vince Scully. Chick Hearn.
Did you
Bob
see that, by the way?
Miller.
Kevin, did you see that, by the way, right there?
Nice. Beautiful.
Yes.
I love it.
Rest
I
in
love
peace,
it.
Chick. Okay, so yeah, Vin, Chick, and Bob so far.
And the 4th one is tough. Man.
That is
Because I do love,
it's hard.
yeah. Big Enberg did a great job back in the day. Was the voice of the Angels for many, many years.
Yeah, the first 3 was like he went through those so quick.
Yeah.
Because those are automatics. But the 4th one is not automatic. It's hard.
Yeah, those are all the easy ones. I know you said lightning round. This is a very, very slow thunderbolt coming out from the clouds right now. I'll go with Dick Enberg. I'll go with Dick Enberg.
Okay. All right. So this one is I'm pretty particular to this one because I covered the younger of these two during his last 2 years of high school and his first 2 years of college. When the careers are over and done, who is the better LA Charger? Phillip Rivers or Justin Herbert?
Oh man. Wow.
This is good. I love this question.
I love this one.
Phillip Rivers has played like 9,000 games and Herbert has played like 9 or 10. I don't think this is a fair question.
Not even. I think
because it'll take so much. Phillip Rivers never gets hurt. He missed a start ever since when he became the starter of the Chargers and has since gone to the Indianapolis Colts. I don't think he missed a single start. Just based on that and the production he's had throughout his career, I know it hasn't shown itself in championships or Super Bowl appearances. That's hard to duplicate. So just based on how difficult it'll be for Justin Herbert to get to that point, I'm going to go with Phillip Rivers.
It's a safe choice.
Are you pretty impressed with Justin Herbert so far?
I am stupendously impressed because I thought he was a bust. I watched this guy at Oregon. I was at the Rose Bowl in January when he looked more like a running back than a quarterback.
Oh, you thought in college he was a bust?
Yes. Yes, okay. I thought in college. I said, yeah, he has all the physical measurables, but the guy can't complete a 5-yard slant. What is he going to do at the NFL level? I've seen guys. I saw Jake Locker in the Pac-12. Yeah, he was a great athlete. If he can't complete a pass downfield, what does it matter? Right. And that's what he looked like to me. And he has definitely shown me, and maybe shown a few other evaluators that were skeptical. Sometimes it's not the player. And to a certain degree, I think Josh Allen has proven this as well from Wyoming going to the Buffalo Bills, how good those guys have been early on in their careers. A lot of times it's hard to overcome not having a lot around you or not being well coached or not being in the right scheme. And I do think at Wyoming, Josh Allen didn't have a lot of talent. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Josh Allen didn't have much to work with at Wyoming. And I think scheme-wise, Justin Herbert just didn't have a lot to work with, or talent-wise at the receiver position, which Oregon historically, even when Mariota was winning the Heisman Trophy and they were having great runs, it's not like they were a giant receiver factory up there in Oregon. So I think Justin Herbert kind of had that working against them. I think that now, but at the time, I thought the Chargers were making the biggest mistake they could ever make.
Get that man a defense. Okay, moving on. Favorite place to eat in LA that is more of a hole-in-the-wall kind of place?
Love this one.
Man, there's a couple of them.
That's fine.
There's a pizza joint not too far from me in Burbank. It's not a hole in the wall, but it's definitely like a family-owned. It's called Dino's Pizza. They have something called a lasagna pizza. It's one of the best things I've ever eaten in my life. The ricotta cheese, the tomato on the top, the extra layer of cheese on top of that. It is absolutely amazing.
It's Dino's also, with a D? D-I-N-O-S?
Yes. And there's another one that I just thought of called Burrito Bomba. This is in North Hollywood. It sounds kind of rinky-dink. It's a pop-up tent that they set up in an alley behind a gas station. That is as hole in the wall as it gets. This isn't even a brick and mortar. This is not even a shop.
That's just a hole. That's just a hole. There's not even a wall.
Yes.
It's just a big hole.
They come out every day, guys, set up a tent and take orders. You can order on Yelp or a couple of other apps. But when I tell you the best breakfast burrito you've ever had, this will be likely the best breakfast burrito you can have in Los Angeles.
And
Burrito
they better throw you a couple of free breakfast burritos for that plug. That's a good plug, right?
Hey, please, by all means, I love it to death. I absolutely love them to death. They are absolutely amazing.
Hit this man up with your food needs in LA. Okay. Biggest and most important lesson you want to pass on to future broadcasters?
I said it earlier. I'm going to say it again. Network. Meet with people. Go to conferences if they have them. I know we're in a unique time at this moment in time, but when things open back up, even look, through technology, there's conferences, there's Zooms, there's things. Find a way. Yeah, we're doing Zoom right now. Reach out, email people, tweet people, Instagram people. Try to find a way to hook up, and there are people who are willing to help you for sure. Myself, at KFig1, you can find me on Twitter. If you want someone to help you out, I'm always available. So, no one ever does anything in this industry on their own. So, as important as it is getting reps and making sure you're good at what you do, make sure you know people and they can guide you in the right direction and tell you exactly what needs to be done for you to make it. So, whatever step in this industry you want to make it.
Love it.
Most entertaining, not best, but most entertaining LA college athlete you've covered?
Reggie Bush.
Ooh, that's
Reggie
a good
Bush.
one.
Without question. Easily.
I love that.
On the field. You're talking on the field.
Yes, on the field. Field. Yes. And high school, since we're talking, you mentioned Oregon earlier, DeAnthony Thomas.
Yes.
Oh, man.
I saw DeAnthony Thomas score like 6 touchdowns in the first half of a high school game, and I was like, yeah, I think this guy's going to be pretty decent.
A buddy of mine who I worked with in Oregon covered DAT and Kenyon Barner at Oregon. And whenever he would talk to DAT, he'd always look back, hey, Kenyon, hey, Kenyon. That was always his thing of trying to get Kenyon's attention. And I still love it to this day.
Nice.
Okay, I'm moving on. Who did you, is there anybody that you based your broadcast career on, an idol or somebody you emulated that helped, that you sort of kept in mind as you tried to create you?
See, I tried to combine a couple of different people. I try to make sure my natural personality shines as much as possible. And I feel that's a trait that I got from Petros Papadakis, who is just a crazy person. He's a wild man all the time.
To say the least.
Trying to balance that with being a professional broadcaster and knowing what to say, what to do, the proper cadence. And I actually got that from James Brown, who is a host that was a host with Fox NFL Sunday for years, now is with CBS, used to host a national radio show about 15 years ago. So it's like, how can I find a way to get the best of both worlds together, where you're this wacky, crazy person, or at the very least having your natural personality shine, while making sure you have the X's and O's, P's and Q's, T's crossed, I's dotted, all of that, and bring it all together as one. And so
James Brown, one of the smoothest deliveries of all time. He's so smooth.
Without a doubt. So that's how I've tried to formulate my, if you want to call it, on-air persona. That's how I've done it.
I dig it.
Most entertaining athlete at any level you've ever interviewed?
Most entertaining athlete ever interviewed. I mean, Kobe was pretty entertaining. I'd probably have to begin with Kobe Bryant. I mean, frustrating as he may have made me as a Laker fan back in the day, you can deny his spectacular play. The degree of difficulty with the shots that he would make were absolutely incredible. There are few players more exciting to watch in my lifetime in any sport than Kobe Bryant.
Best and worst memory working in broadcast. That can range from chaos behind the scenes to favorite game or instance you've covered.
Well, my worst memory is easy. Petros and Monty were doing a radio show. I was the board op at the time. And we're in the middle of a segment. Everything's fine. And then all of a sudden, our board dies. So our board that keeps us on the air and on the, over the air for people to hear literally just dies for no reason. So in the moment of shock, when we're trying to figure out what's going on, what the hell do? We have an auxiliary studio up the hall. And it's up to me, at least I feel, as the board op technical producer, to stay calm in the midst of the storm. And I actually think this situation actually helped me a lot, to be honest, in my development. I said, okay, well, we're off the air now. We have a studio up the hall. Let's get to it. Let's make sure we transition in and bring everything that we need with us. Switch the studio over. Make sure we have all our microphones turned on. I can't afford to run around like a chicken with my head cut off. Because we know, working in the broadcasting industry, 4 seconds of dead air feels like 5 hours. So I believe all told, we were off the air for about 4 to 5 minutes. But within that time, I have to make sure that when we do go on the air, we sound good. We sound like we're supposed to sound. Everything is up and running the way it's supposed to. And we don't just have a jumble cluster, jumping back on the air. So that definitely taught me that anything can happen at any time. The worst thing that could possibly happen in radio is you not being on the air. And now once I process that this happened, what's the next step? Don't jump up and just start running around and say, oh my God, 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 because that's not going to solve any problem. So I think that was definitely a trial in some persistence and trying to find a way to make it through a very difficult situation. The best experience? Wow. I don't know if one particular experience stands out. I've had so many good memories and so many good moments being there. The radio station has been like such a family. They've welcomed me with open arms. They've given me opportunities. I can't thank them enough. I've had so many really good memories at the radio station. There's no one that really stands out above the others. I mean, quite honestly, a lot of times some of my favorite moments are just a segment where we don't have any interviews. We might not even be talking about sports. It could be, Fred Rogan and Rodney Pete making fun of our update anchor, Victor Brick Jacobs, and us having a giant laugh over it. And the fans telling us how much that segment entertained them. And now that I think of it, I've talked myself through it now. Getting a phone call from a listener who said he didn't want to go on the air, but told me how much we brighten up his day and how much it means to him and other listeners. You don't realize the kind of impact you have on other people's lives. I think I mentioned that a little bit earlier in the show. When you say, I'm just an idiot that talks about sports on a microphone. We're not laying bricks here. But realize that little 5 to 15 minute span that somebody's driving to work from home or driving home from work and they've had a tough day and family's tough and all that, that time that you made them smile or made them laugh or even just made them think about something else is invaluable to them, their sanity, however you want to slice it. So when I get calls like that from people telling me that we make a difference in their lives, it validates everything that we do. Because ultimately, we're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing it for the listeners. And when the listeners call with that sort of feedback, that makes my day.
That's awesome stuff. You also had someone create an intro music piece for you for the radio station. That's pretty cool, too.
78th in Vermont.
Yeah, so Petrus and Matt have someone who makes jingles for them for their radio show. And so the genesis of this, and I don't know if you know the full backstory on it or not, Brandon. I feel like you might. So Pat O'Brien was a longtime sports reporter, was part of the NBA on CBS's coverage for a long period of time. And at this particular time, he was hosting the midday show at the radio station. And so there's an off-air conversation that Pat is having with a couple of the hosts. And he mentioned that he was in a really crappy part of the neighborhood. He says, I was in the dirtiest part of the hood I've ever been in before. And he mentioned the cross streets. And so I told him, oh, that's interesting. Those are my cross streets. That's exactly where I'm from. And so Pat, who was known to embellish at times, basically said, oh, did I say 76 in Vermont? I meant 46 in Vermont. And so Petro thought it was the funniest thing ever because he had clearly caught Pat O'Brien in a lie.
Right. Just
trying to make it up for histrionics, trying to jazz up a story. So, of course, Petros and Matt never keep anything off the air. There's no secrets with them whatsoever. They go on the air. Their first segment of their show, make a giant deal about it. The person that makes jingles for them actually makes a jingle with my name saying Kevin Figures, 78th in Vermont.
78th in Vermont.
You know, and that was the genesis of the jingle. It was literally Pat O'Brien telling a story that none of us knows which was 100% true or not. I can guarantee you the cross streets weren't, because he told us explicitly that they weren't and that he was making it up. So Petrus and Matt take an off-air conversation, make a big deal about it on the air, and then all of a sudden it's now etched in time as my on-air jingle.
It's good stuff.
That's amazing. Okay. Favorite movie you're ashamed to admit?
Favorite movie I'm ashamed to admit.
Guilty pleasure.
I enjoyed Mean Girls. I was a big fan of Mean Girls back in the day. I liked Lindsay Lohan.
That's a funny movie.
It is very funny.
I don't think you should be too ashamed of that one. I think you can do better.
I mean, most people will probably think that that's like, it's high school girls and it's not that. But I mean, it's like you mentioned, Brandon, it's fairly entertaining. It's very funny.
There you go.
Okay. That's pretty good.
All right. We've reached the bonus question. Most difficult or awkward interview you were ever in the booth for or a part of?
So our midday show with Steve Hartman, who worked in Los Angeles for a long period of time. He's now in San Diego. Michael Thompson, who was the radio analyst for the Lakers. They did a midday show.
Klay Thompson's dad.
Klay Thompson's father, yes. Klay Thompson's father. Michael won a couple of championships with the Lakers in the 1980s. He is now the Lakers radio analyst. So they were at Raiders training camp. At the time, we had the radio rights in LA to air the Raider games. And so they gave us a lot of access. So we went and actually did a live broadcast from training camp. And at the time, Warren Sapp, the Hall of Fame defensive tackle, was on the Raiders. He had just left the Buccaneers. I believe it was his first year in Oakland. And he could not be more surly, more salty, more short, more disrespectful at times, to be honest, to Michael and Steve. And now I was not out there on site, but I was working the broadcast from the radio station. And that was the most uncomfortable I had ever felt. And I could feel the tension through the broadcast coming out from training camp back to me. Now, why Warren was like that, I don't know. He had a tendency throughout his career to be prickly with the media at times. And I guess we caught him on a bad day. But that was probably the most uncomfortable. That's the first thought that comes to mind, is me feeling uncomfortable witnessing an interview for the radio station.
It's a really good one.
That is all 10 plus the bonus question. Congratulations. You've made it through the lightning round. I know this is a personal milestone you can carry with you for the rest of your life. I applaud you. We appreciate you. And you are both a gentleman and a scholar in our eyes.
That was fun, Kev. That was great stuff.
I greatly appreciate that. I made it through. I survived. If I could survive this lightning round, I could survive anything.
Heck yeah.
Well, Kev, as we do every Sports Amigos episode, we raise our cups. I forgot to make sure you had a drink. You got a drink before we started, right? There.
I have one right here.
There it is. Oh, you got like a drink. You got like a drink there.
When you guys said have a drink prepared, I was like, well, I can have a glass of water. I can break out the good stuff.
I texted him before coming on. I was like, make sure you get a drink. We always like to have a nice little toast at the end. Well, look, buddy, I miss you. I love you. It means the world to me that you came on with us. Yeah, it's been a blast. And, cheers to you. You're a certified Sports Amigo now. You're the 4th guest we've ever had on, going down in history. So thank you. And best of health to you and the fam, man.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Cheers to you guys. I love what you guys are doing here. Giving some people who may be interested in getting into the industry a little bit of insight and a little bit of background as to how it becomes, how it comes to be. So kudos to you guys for actually reaching out and helping people out doing this. You guys are amazing. So I appreciate it.
Cheers, fellas.
Cheers.
Amen.